Everybody, here's some good news about the fourth stimulus checks that we have all been waiting for. Some lawmakers in Congress have suggested that the unused money could be allocated for another round of stimulus payments. In other words, a fourth stimulus check is on the way. And there are also a few states that have already put forward new stimulus bills. This is the fourth stimulus check update, everybody. Stay until the end of this video because you don't want to miss the important stimulus news.
Side pressure from autocrats. They seek to advance their own power, export and expand their influence around the world, and justify the repressive policies and practices as a more efficient way to address today's challenges. That's how it's sold. By voices that seek to fan the flames of social division and political polarization. And perhaps most importantly, and most worrying of all, by increasing the dissatisfaction of people all around the world with democratic governments that they feel are failing to deliver for their needs. In my view, this is the defining challenge of our time. Democracy, government of the people, by the people, for the people, can at times be fragile, but it also is inherently resilient. It's capable of self-correction and it's capable of self-improvement. And yes, democracy is hard. We all know that. It works best with consensus and cooperation. When people and parties that might have opposing views sit down and find ways to work together, things begin to work. But it's the best way to unleash human potential and defend human dignity and solve big problems. And it's up to us to prove that. Democracies are not all the same. We don't agree on everything, all of us in this meeting today. But the choices we make together are going to define, in my view, the course of our shared future for generations to come. And as a global community for democracy, we have to stand up for the values that unite us.
Now, the first major stimulus package during the crisis was passed in March of 2020. It included about $150 billion for state and local governments. But the money came with a spending deadline of December 31st, 2021. Now, the funding has been used on a vast range of projects, such as small business relief, plastic shields at Surface Desk, and technology. But as of this writing, about $10.4 billion of the money was sent to the government entities and has not been spent. Now, over in New Mexico, the state governors have called on legislators to allocate federal stimulus funding during a special session this month, and that's a move to accelerate debate over a historic infusion of $1.1 billion. And the governor's announcement could push New Mexico lawmakers closer to a decision on how to spend an injection of federal money in a state that has struggled for decades with poverty. Plus, some Republican state representatives have also proposed refundable tax credit for people in Illinois that are feeling the pressure of price increases caused by inflation. Single filers that make $75,000 or less a year could receive $200, and head of household filers that make up to $112,000 annually will also qualify for $200. Joint filers making up to $150,000 could receive $400. The estimated cost of the proposal is $1.4 billion, and Republicans have a few ways to pay for it. That's through leftover crisis relief allocated through infrastructure spending. And it's not just rising inflation that Republicans say they're targeting. It's also increases on prices for everyday products. Now, this stimulus bill, everybody, will have to get passed through the General Assembly, where legislators will return in January. And the U.S. Labor Department just reported that initial claims of unemployment insurance rose last week, but held at levels consistent with how the job market looked before the crisis. But according to a new U.S. Department of Labor report, more than $87 billion in unemployment benefits funded by the federal government was likely siphoned from the system during the crisis, much of it due to fraud. Congress authorized many new programs in the crisis early days for people who lost their jobs, and these programs ended on Labor Day of this year. However, the unprecedented level of funding led to a surge in theft and fraud, and according to the watchdog, and states which administer benefits may have issued some payments in error for some reasons unrelated to fraud. So that is all the news about the fourth stimulus checks that you want to know. Thank you again for your support.
We have to stand for justice and the rule of law, for free speech, free assembly, a free press, freedom of religion, and for all the inherent human rights of every individual. My late friend, Congressman John Lewis, was a great champion of American democracy and for civil rights around the world, learning from and gaining inspiration from other great leaders like Gandhi and Mandela. With his final words as he was dying to our nation last year, he reminded our country, quote, Democracy is not a state, it's an act. Democracy is not a state, it is an act. So over the next 2 days, we're bringing together leaders from more than 100 governments alongside activists, trade unionists, and other members of civil society, leading experts and researchers and representatives from the business community, not to assert that any one of our democracies is perfect or has all the answers, but to lock arms and reaffirm our shared commitment to make our democracies better, to share ideas and learn from each other, and to make concrete commitments of how to strengthen our own democracies and push back on authoritarianism, fight corruption, promote and protect human rights of people everywhere, to act. This summit is a kickoff of a year in action for all of our countries, to follow through on our commitments and report back next year on the progress we've made. And as we do this, the United States is going to lead by example, investing in our own democracy, supporting our partners around the world at the same time. From the earliest days of my administration, we pursued a broad-based agenda to prove that American democracy can still do big things and take on challenges that matter most. That's why we immediately passed what we call the American Rescue Plan, to get shots in people's arms as fast as possible at home and around the world, to help get this pandemic under control, and to stimulate inclusive and lasting economic recovery that's also helping to drive global growth. Last month, I was proud to sign a bipartisan piece of legislation, a true act of consensus between Democrats and Republicans in our country, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. This legislation will make a generational investment to deliver what people need most in the 21st century: clean water, safe roads, high-speed broadband internet, and so much more, all of which strengthens our democracy by creating good-paying union jobs that will translate to lives of opportunity and dignity for working people with better access to the tools and resources they need to thrive. And soon, I hope to sign into law a bill we call the Build Back Better plan, which will be an extraordinary investment in our people and our workers and give American families just a little more breathing room to deal with their problems and their opportunities. Our domestic agenda has been focused on delivering for the needs of the American people, strengthening our democratic institutions at home. My first day in office, I signed an executive order to advance racial justice and equality. And my administration recently released our first national strategy on gender equality and equity. We're fostering greater worker power because workers organizing a union to give them the voice of the workplace in their community and their country isn't just an act of economic solidarity. It's democracy in action.